You're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's evening. Welcome to the Dew Beach Finance Committee meeting. It is Monday, November 3rd at 5:02 p.m. And we'll get started with, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll do a quick roll call. Bernie Kraus.
Here.
John Gebhardt is not here, I know. Michael Schaefer.
Present.
Here.
Oh, thanks. Mark Mayer.
Here.
Vince Suzy.
Here.
Dominic Prestipino.
Here.
Eric Nelson. Manny Bermeo, you're here. And I know Zeke is not, he's, I don't know, cruising the ocean somewhere, so. All right, thank you, everybody. Get back to my agenda. All right, first of all, we need to have a motion to adopt today's agenda. Hopefully you had a chance to review that.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
A second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Also, I sent out the minutes from the last meeting. Everybody had a chance to review them. Does anybody have any issues with Bernie's fabulous minutes? And if there's no discussion, can I have a motion to approve those as well?
I can't add.
Yeah, somebody
prepared them.
Thank you.
A second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So our minutes are approved. All righty, now we're going to proceed with our agenda for the day. As noted in the agenda, if anybody is on for public comment, we'll take public comment as we go through each item, so we make sure that we take input as needed. The first item on the agenda, and you may or may not have read the details posted online or looked at the prior council, but in the course of some of the finance discussions and with the audit, everything, there's one challenge that we have, well, several challenges, but one of the big ones, and that they asked us, the main issue to look at, is that, as you know, we have the unassigned funds and also the rainy day fund, and those are tied to a percentage of the operating budget. And right now, they're tied to the current year operating budget. And so when the current year budget, it fluctuates, it's not stable, things are high or low, whatever, and we're always budgeting for a moving target, if you will. And so what they're suggesting, and this is my distillation also, so any of you, if I'm not distilling it correctly, basically, if we can tie that percentage that we put in each of those funds to the prior year budget that's a known fixed number, then we're budgeting a fixed number all the time. It will make life easier for everyone to handle. So that is the gist of it. And again, if I did not capture that correctly, because there's a lot of discussion, this is my interpretation from the town council meeting. The commissioners, we have Gary on there, and Gary, this was your issue as well. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, you distilled pretty well, actually. Let me just back up just for a second in terms of history, how we got to where we are. The FY 2018 and 2019, both of those audit reports, the auditors recommended that the town have a general fund balance policy. And all of the town's funds, except for the beach fund, are general funds. We didn't have a policy at that time. In FY 2020, we took a shot at it. And the auditors came back and took a look at what we had done. And in their FY 2020 report, what we had come up with didn't pass muster. So in FY 21, we had a joint workshop of budget and finance, the investment committee, and the audit committee. And we came up with some options. And in May of 2021, I believe it was, we came up with something that was acceptable for the auditors. And we've been following that since then. And each year since that time, the auditors have complimented us on two things. First of all, having a fund balance policy, and then secondly, following it. And so the issue here that we're trying to address is to make, as you suggested, to make following that policy a bit easier, just in meeting the requirements for FY26, we had to have excess funds of about $200,000 in the FY25 results. Unfortunately, we had that, and each year we've been fortunate to have enough excess funds in the current year's budget to meet the next year's requirements. But that may not always be the case. So the idea here is to build something into the budget process so that we can plan to increase the rainy day fund over time, so that at the end of the fiscal year, we'll have the required percentages in the rainy day fund, and we can allow the unassigned fund to grow as needed, so that we would meet the target of 15% of the operating budget. So that's where we are, and the second page there is just intended to try to crystallize that in specific language for the fund balance policy.
Thanks, Gary. Do we have any discussion from the committee, or has this been adequately explained?
My only question would be, what you're saying is, for example, this year, we're trying to make a percentage of of next year's budget, as opposed to doing it on what we earned and what we think we're going. That kind of the gist?
What is this? Okay, the Sarah budget this year is, whatever it is. So when Sheena does her budget in a month or so, we're gonna look at this year's operating budget, and we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna set that based on this budget, yes, for the next cycle. So then she's got a fixed number to work with, we know what it is, and,
Okay.
It's 15%, right?
well, 15% is the,
Unassigned.
is the unassigned, and
And the
then
rainy day is
50% is the, yeah, that's right. So, and so this policy that was posted online is basically articulates that, from a legal perspective, and Fred is our town attorney, if you go, not met him before.
I think it makes a lot of sense, helps with planning.
All right, so if we want to go ahead and approve this policy change, and then we can also, I also want to have a further discussion about the overall funds policy besides this, but we could put this issue to bed and then talk about that if I could have a motion to approve this.
I'm just curious, is this what it's historically been?
It's the same percentage,
If it's
but
been
we've done it, but
historical?
what would happen is Sheena would put together next year's budget, and then whatever the 50% and 15% of that budget she prepared would be the number set. Then as the budget might fluctuate next year, or whatever happens, and there might,
But the percentage is always at 15 and 50?
yes,
Right,
yes,
that's what I'm
yes. So, we're not changing the percent, we're just changing sort of the accounting basis for it, so that we have a more stable number.
So we're agreeing to something that's basically already been established, pretty much?
Except we're just tying it to last year instead of this year.
Okay.
And so it might be a few percent off, if the budget, goes up 5% or whatever a year, then
Got
it's,
it.
might be slightly less, but,
Well, it also impacts the budget process. So
yes.
you actually have to build into the budget process, as part of the, discussion, regular contributions to the rainy day fund, so that at the end of the year, you'll have 50%, you'll have in the rainy day fund, 50% of the operating expenditures for FY27.
So. Are there any more, I don't think we have any public comments on, I didn't see anybody, but if anybody, all right.
And this was something that Commissioner Persinger and our external auditor went back and forth about, and the auditor said that this was fine and a change that could be made, but it needs to come from this committee to council, and then council will vote to make the change.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
surprised lack of comments.
so I'd like to, if anybody would like to make a motion to approve this new language.
I would like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, thank you. So we will go ahead and recommend these changes to the commissioners. The other issue that came up with the audit was to potentially have a better definition of what the uses are for the different funds, the rainy day and the unassigned, and Bill Stevens also mentioned to me privately also that the beach fund does not really have a very well-defined policy, what it can and can't be used for. And so we might want to tighten up that language. So I was wondering if you could educate us for a little bit on what it would take to do that and your thoughts overall. But the thought is right now, there's not, without knowing, let's define what a rainy day is. And there's certain things that can and can't. Same with the beach. And, we've got the beach, the real beach, and then we have the Bay Beach that's been created. And so there's issues with them, so.
So when it comes to the beach fund, the only language that I know of, and might not be picked up, I can move up here. The language that I'm familiar with is expressed in chapter 1. Is there a whoopee cushion under here? What was it?
Halloween's not over.
167-9 is the section where there is some expression of what the limitations are for use of the funds that accrue in the beach fund. And there's not a lot of language there. What language is there, and I'll read it because it's so brief, is that it can accrue for public purposes related exclusively to beach and dune replacement, repair, maintenance, and administrative expenses related directly thereto. So beach and dune replacement, repair of the beach and dune, maintenance of the beach and dune, and administrative expenses related to those functions. And it's, in the years that I've been associated with Dewey Beach, the question of what we can do with those funds, since they've been accruing and since we have not incurred significant, like major expenses over the years related to beach and dune replacement, because that's been funded by the US government. Questions have been put to me and the administration as to whether we can divert those funds to another place. And we've always concluded, unfortunately, that we have very little flexibility when it comes to those funds, that they are proceeds from a tax that was expressed to be for a particular purpose. And if you wish to revise that purpose somehow, you can do that with respect to prospective. You may be able to do it with respect to prospective revenues, but not to revenues that have accrued to date. And the revenues that accrue don't accrue very fast because it's a pretty modest tax. But over all these years, they become significant. So it's not surprising that attention gets paid to that account from time to time. But I think the best we could do if we wanted to really expand the application of those funds to other sources would be to set those funds aside and establish new parameters for revenues and begin accruing them or collecting them over time. It's not a very satisfactory answer if those funds are needed to address a burning issue other than related to beach and dune replacement, repair, maintenance, and administrative expenses.
Well, and I guess the question is, how do we define, beach maintenance, for example?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not defined anywhere.
And what do we, and is there, what maintenance goes against that now?
Right now, the only thing that I'm aware of, and Sheeta, correct me if I'm wrong, is the beach sweep that is done in the morning to
The
keep the
raking.
beach clean and to keep the beach level.
But so what if we did something like trash? Is that maintaining the beach? I don't know how much money that is, but I think that's and I think the other issue probably as well is that beach replenishment has been paid by the government, but we're in an era where if somebody's mad, they might not pay for it, so is this the time to do something with that? But, okay.
How about the Bay versus Ocean issue?
Yeah, what about the Bay Beach?
I think, isn't it the case that we've interpreted that language to refer to our ocean? Yep. Mm-hmm. beach and dune replacement, I mean, it's hard, I can't say with a great deal of, you know.
Confidence.
No.
No, well, that's fair, but I think that's what I know, so I mean, so basically.
That's an important, because it's, Bay Beach really hasn't been there that long. When the Hyatt was built, they required them to create that beach.
Mhm.
So technically, it wasn't really a beach, but now you do have a beach, and they do replenish it with sand, so I assume that's the government again, it's like, I don't know.
It's the Hyatt.
No, it is the Hyatt. Okay.
Yeah, so it's,
Can I ask a question?
yeah,
I'm curious as to the direction that the conversation has taken. This was originally teed up as clarifying the language for the existing use purposes, but what we've been talking about is trying to figure out a way to change it. So what is it we're trying to do?
and we're just trying to understand what the definition is for all the funds policy usage and so on. We're just asking the questions. I don't think anybody's trying to write checks or anything, but we're trying to understand what we can and can't do right now.
Thank you.
When was this originated? Was this after the that 62 or 63 disaster, or when did this go into effect?
So it wasn't that, because the town was created in 81 or 82, 81, fun since 81. So, yeah,
Kate
adopted
in the
in,
background says 92, and she's also put this up on the screen if you can see it.
yeah, the beach assessment tax was adopted in September of 1992.
So not necessarily in response to any great calamity, just to help us prepare for the future should something happen. And again, we're the only town on the entire shore that's actually had the wherewithal to gather funds for this. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, that neither Lewis or Rehoboth have a fund like this.
Well, I think the other aspect, again, of trying to understand this is, so we've got this beach, and this helps. So you're basically what I'm getting out of this is, we can't retroactively decide it's for something else when it was established for one person, one reason, been amassed. So that makes sense.
But
So-
you can look to do something different going forward.
You could. I think you could. Technically, it's a property tax. I think if you, politically speaking, and that's not why I'm here, but politically speaking, if you broaden it too much from where it currently is, then you could get pushback on the notion that it requires a referendum for the town ever to enact a property tax. So certainly the revenues couldn't go directly into the general fund and be used just to fund the town. But if there was some expansion on the perimeter or periphery of this area, we might be able to craft something tight enough that it would not run afoul of the referendum language.
Is this the assessment that shows up as beach replenishment fee?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's pretty clear.
So then we also have then the rainy day fund, and so I guess that, one of the, this is why this whole line of questioning is, okay, so this is, now we understand what the beach, what that language is, then what's the rainy day fund, and what is, a storm is another rainy day, but then how is that fund used, and what are the guardrails on that as compared to, as compared to the beach? And again, this is for educational purposes.
So when Commissioner Persinger and I kind of worked on this, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, it was, rainy day was for something, if we had COVID, a large majority of our revenue here in town is from parking, about $2 million, right, Sheena? About $2 million. And what if we had nobody come visit? So we lost, let's say, $1 million in revenue that year because of parking. You do have a rainy day fund to try to make up for the expenses that we need to pay, especially the salary of our employees, especially our police officers and our employees that work in town. I don't know, Commissioner Persinger, is that what you envisioned on the rainy day fund use?
Yeah, it's really for, to have money to keep the town running in the event that there's some sort of catastrophic problem that really interrupts the town's revenues. It could be COVID, it could be a big storm, it could be some other plague that we might be faced with, but, it's basically to be able to keep the town running. And then the unassigned fund is really the fund where we fund the short-term expenses for the town. All of the revenues generally go to that unassigned fund, and it may get allocated to one of the other funds within the general fund framework. But that's where all the bills get paid. And so 2 months is considered sufficient amount of cash to keep that cash flow going.
All right, that helps. And so,
I'm just curious, has it ever been used? Does anybody know? No.
Not that I'm aware of, not since 2022 and then 21 when we started it, correct?
That's right. And I just saw a comment on there. I think it could be generally just looked at as a general reserve fund.
Are there balance requirements for the fund? Meaning the rainy day fund needs to be, 3 times our annual expenses to run the town. Anything like that?
It's 50% of operating expenses, budgeted operating expenses.
And the unassigned fund is 15% of operating expenditures, and that's what we voted to, what y'all just voted on, to base on past year rather than future year.
How about for the beach replenishment fund? Any guidance there or requirements?
No, I don't believe there are any requirements. The code requirement establishes what the millage rate, I guess is the term, against your property assessment. And to change that would require an act of council to amend the ordinance. But given the fact that we've never utilized the funds, it would be a hard case to make that it should be altered.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going is if we had a worst case scenario storm where we had to replenish the entire beach, what would that cost us? What do we have in the fund? And if we drained it, how long would it take to get back to the current level?
There's over $5 million in Brown Advisory, which is all beach replenishment. And that has been going on since, you said 92, that the fund.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's only probably 15,000 that goes in there each year.
And again, whenever there's been an issue to replenish the beaches, it's been Army Corps of Engineers that stepped in to do that for the entire state. And we've been sitting by as a good conservative investors that are never had to spend anything that we've accumulated. Part of me just thinking out loud is like, is this an it seems kind of silly at this point to keep collecting it if it's never going to be spent. I guess what everyone's talking about is a time to possibly have folks get together and consider what might be some ways to either decide to abolish it or to change the language and how it could be spent moving forward. If what's in there now can't be changed, then maybe just it sits there and the interest off that account can be redirected somewhere else. I guess those are all options, but otherwise we're just continuing to tax people to collect for something that we can't really utilize for anything else. Even if we needed it for a rainy day fund, we couldn't pull those funds for that, right?
well, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of talk about, again, not, FEMA and the government not spending the money that they've spent in the past. And so, maybe we could miss one 3-year cycle and see what happens, but then we might be forced to do it if we had to pay it by ourselves to keep to keep a beach at all, then we would probably want to spend it. So I think.
Right. And what is that? What would that cost? We don't know what that cost would be, do we?
The cost would be exorbitant, though. I mean, I think we should also be thinking about what we can reasonably, expect ourselves to be able to do. I think that $15 million is like, in my mind, you can plant beach grass for $15 million, but you can't dredge a 3-mile stretch of beach, considering that it's a parallel beach, and if no one on either side of us is dredging, that sand is going to wash, down the street to Indian Beach or up the street to Rehoboth. So I think we need to, and this isn't the purpose probably of this discussion, but realistically that, the money that we're saving is probably not the beach, but more towards the dune replenishment or beach grasses, in my mind, at least.
Yeah, and we won't know till we, obviously till, God forbid it sits in there, but I think again, it's just kind of understanding what those parameters are and again, the auditors had mentioned about the fund, so that was the real, I was just, asking that question, especially and should we review the rainy day policy at our next meeting, or is that something the commissioners are gonna do? Is my other question, is who,
This committee can always make recommendations to council, and council will act on recommendations. The auditor had suggested that we look at where we were basing the funds on, so prior year as opposed to current year, and council requested this committee to review that. So that's part one. If you think there's something else that needs to be done, y'all can always send that forward.
well, I don't know if there was anything else, or it was just that policy, or if it was also, I thought there was an issue of how we define using the rainy day policy. Was that incorrect? Maybe I missed it.
That is certainly something that could be assessed by this committee.
Okay. Well, maybe we can take. Yes. Can you hear the comment?
David?
Yeah, hi, David Moskowitz, full-time resident. First point is the beach fund discussion is the agenda item was vague, and this should have been on the agenda. It delved directly into the beach fund. Second is the beach replenishment is sorely needed, because a beach replenishment would actually cost $5 million. 2 years ago, the state was telling the town, you're going to have to pay a portion of it. The only thing that saved the town is a new governor took over. That's going to be, he has 3 years left in his term. So the state could come back at any point, because now there's budget deficits. They could say this year, next year, who knows, we want money from Dewey Beach, and we have that now. The other thing is the federal government is looking, if you read articles, looking to cut the share they give towards beach replenishment. So if the federal government cuts or the state, the town actually has the money, and that's what it's needed. And if it has around 6 million or so, 5 million is needed for a beach replenishment, and a beach replenishment is done about every 2 to 3 years, depending on the storm. The second thing is, if there's a bad storm, the beach replenishment, you have that fund for the beach, but then you also have other expenses. And you still have to pay the police and so forth, but you're going to actually have less rental income. So that means less rental tax. You're going to possibly have less transfer tax. But you probably have more building permit in a bad scenario. But anyway, even that's where the rainy day fund comes. So I just wanted to give that information, but the beach fund should not be touched. It's not supposed to be for the Hyatt. I believe the Hyatt has some sort of contract agreement with the town on maintenance of that Bay Beach. And a lot of the Bay Beaches are private property, so that's why the town's never delved into the Bay Area. The beach replenishment fund is sorely needed. It should not be expanded. It's used, and it's going to be probably needed the way the state governments and federal governments are going. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And yeah, this is when we maybe didn't have this exactly on the agenda. Again, just trying to educate the committee generally, since we have Fred here, so we just understand as a committee all these things. We have some new members, and so this is not an attempt to veto anything. It's just really understanding, again, where all the parameters are. So, and I think, unless does anybody have any other questions on this topic, or are we good to move on? All right. Thanks, everybody. We have Sean next on our agenda, unless I'm doing it backwards, is the Brown Advisory reports, and we have Sean Futch on the line. somewhere. Where are you, Sean?
Hey, Iris, I'm here. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Perfect. No, absolutely. I'll try to keep this brief for those of you who I've not had a chance to meet or engage with previously, part of the investment management team here at Brown Advisory. So let me share my screen really quick. Is everyone able to see this?
Yep.
Perfect. So I'll just start with a quick overview of kind of where the portfolio stands, dive into performance, take a look at, how the managers have contributed, and then, just wrap up with some thoughts on the broader market, the Fed, and kind of what our strategy looks like moving forward. So, apologies for, not having, October numbers. Those will be ready Friday, so happy to follow up with that. If of interest, it's just a function of timing with reporting being ready. But, as of the end of the third quarter, the total value of the Taro's investment portfolio was just over $7 million. So, of course, the majority of this, about, $6.5 million is held within, the Beach Replenishment Long Fund, with the rest, spread across the short term, as well as that flexible equity separately managed account. So in terms of asset allocation, the portfolio, in our view, remains pretty well diversified and pretty closely aligned with the targets as stated, per the investment policy statement. And so we're looking at, roughly 67%, sitting, within our stability assets of fixed income, 18% or so sitting in large cap US, and then another, 6.5 slugs spread across, small cap US equities. And that final piece, just under, 6% or so, excuse me, just under, 4%, is sitting, across our international exposure. So moving on to performance, I'd say we've had a solid year so far with, the total portfolio up, 7.6% year to date on a growth basis and 7.1% net of fees, which is right in line with the blended benchmark. As far as contributors go, fixed income has been, extremely additive for the portfolio, returning, 6.5% year to date. And of course, equities have been even hotter, up 10.2%. But I think, the standout, for 2025 has really been, these ex-US players, particularly across emerging markets and some of the developed international exposure, within the portfolio, with, returns sitting at, 17.9%. Well, taking things a step further, just taking a look through at the underlying managers for the long-term portfolio. Voya Intermediate Bond Fund has been a really steady performer, giving us 6.4% year to date, slightly outpacing its bench. And on the equity side, our Brown Advisory Global Leaders Fund returned 12.9%, which is behind the mark where we want it to be, but on an absolute basis, it's been really driven by, strong performance from some quality growth names, mainly tied to, the artificial intelligence infrastructure theme. On emerging markets, there's been some excellent performance there, with the fund giving us, roughly 23%. And a lot of that has been, at the hands of, a weakening dollar, as well as, regional, policy support and economic momentum, which has been, a real boom for the portfolio. And then Eddie Bradley and I, this quarter, made 2 new additions here for the long-term portfolio. One, being Eagle Capital. You can't see it here, but Eagle, or you can see it here. Eagle Capital, as well as some passive exposure in the S&P 500 ETF. And a lot of that has been really trying to make sure the portfolio doesn't fall behind as we continue to see some of this momentum at the hands of AI and all the underlying names there. But trying to balance the scales essentially, with active exposure in Eagle, which somewhat runs with flexible equity, but really helps us to kind of beef up those exposures for the portfolio. Shifting gears a bit, I wanted to spend a little time on fixed income, just given that, that makes up, the bulk of the portfolio. And so more broadly, we're really feeling optimistic on that exposure. The Fed's recent rate cuts, which has largely been prompted by, a cooling labor market, have continued to help support, bond prices. And with inflation, still running above target, which has kind of been a continuing challenge since 2021 or so. Still hot or sticky, but showing some signs of moderation there. And Eddie and I really think maintaining that intermediate bond exposure really offers a good balance between yield and stability for the portfolio. And so, looking ahead, I think as the Fed continues to ease, and of course, you see markets kind of pricing in something different than what we heard from the Fed Chair Powell. And so we may or may not see another cut, before the end of the year. But, regardless, I think we expect to see those short-term yields to continue to fall as we head into 2026, making that intermediate exposure pretty compelling relative to cash. On the macro front, I think that pivot, coming out of the Federal Reserve has really been driven by, a slowdown in job growth and the uptick in unemployment. And so while we're not seeing any material signs of a full-blown recession per se, it's clear that, the labor picture is starting to shift. And that could, potentially, serve as, a bit of a disconnect between what we're seeing. But we're continuing to keep a close eye on how that plays out. And a lot of that is, being reflected here, in performance on the short-term portfolio. But yet and still, we feel really confident. And of course, we're ahead of, the CPI print, which is a positive. And so, from a strategic standpoint, I think we're continuing to believe in the value of diversification despite, seeing some of the concentration, across equity markets, with, spots like U.S. large growth, trading at historically high valuations. We see pockets of opportunity, across spots like small cap and international equities that still look, reasonably priced and offer a ton of potential, upside over the short to intermediate term. And of course, the fixed income allocation continues to be well positioned to benefit from the rate environment that we're in, but we want to maintain that flexibility to adjust, as the conditions, in this, landscape of, pretty high uncertainty continues to evolve. But, all that to say, we're pleased with how the portfolio has performed throughout this year, and feel confident, in the position looking ahead, as we roll into the final quarter. So I'll stop there. But, are there any questions, concerns? Happy to dive, deeper on any parts of the portfolio.
Thank you very much, Sean, for your presentation. It really helps to interpret our reports that we have. Does anybody have any questions, discussion?
Yeah, Sean, it's Vinny Susi. you mentioned flexibility. How flexible can you be? I mean, there's talk about a bubble out there, specifically with the AI movement that's going on. I mean, how flexible can you be to move equities from whatever fund to the fixed fund and back and forth? To kind
So
of,
there's
kind
no
of protect,
tax consequences.
protect what we have, right?
Absolutely. And, no, Vinny, great question. So, the way I think about it is, Eddie and I, our job is essentially to do no harm and protect the corpus of the portfolio. I think, in cases such as this, the benefit for us managing, the town's portfolio is that there are no tax consequences to any, portfolio changes. And so, if we see things starting to shift, to the downside in a meaningful way, within, as long as we're maintaining the exposure within, the bands set by the investment policy statement, we're able to quickly maneuver. And so we can maintain, that level of, nimbleness to make sure that we're, protecting to the downside as much as possible.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. But I think, beyond that, we're in an environment where, we could potentially see, things continue to run hotter, for the next 12 months or so. Some folks think, it could go further than that, 18 to 24 months. And so we want to make sure that we're maintaining that exposure for the portfolio to capture that upside. But again, we're flexible to make those changes as necessary.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
Huh? Okay. Is there any public comment or questions? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, Sean.
Absolutely. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is it's a town financial reports, which I believe sent everyone posted. And Bill or Sheena, do you want to make any just quick overview for the committee?
Yeah, I'll start off first and then turn it over to Sheena. So far, we're looking good in most of our areas. With revenue coming in, what was expected with parking, transfer tax, and what was the other one, Sheena? The other one was business licenses and building permits. We're right about where we should be in those areas as far as what revenues we thought were going to come in and what have been coming in. Sheena?
Afternoon. Town manager is correct. We're looking real positive so far on our revenues for this year, as we are halfway through the fiscal year. We met with various department heads for a 6-month budget review this past week. This helps to ensure that the department heads, the town manager and accounting are all on the same page as far as how expenses are allocated, where we are with any grants, and how the department is meeting budget. This will also assist us when we start the FY27 budget and preparing for a budget amendment. Now, I know there's been some discussion as to why we do a budget amendment. The reason is we do not plan for grants and any expenses that would come with those grants. If we don't get the grant, we don't purchase that item. So since majority of the grants are not guaranteed, there's only 2 that in the 8.5 years I've been here that we've gotten every year, but the amount is not the same every time. So you can't really budget for those. The one that we do get that we budget for, we use in our capital expenditures budget, is the county grant that the police get. So with us not knowing what grants we get, we don't budget for them. that throws off our expenses and our revenues. Looks like we're not meeting budget. We're getting more revenue and overspending. So we did the budget amendment in December to say, hey, we've accounted for this extra income that we've gotten and to show that we are keeping track of everything. If we did budget for the grants and we didn't get them, we'd have to do a budget amendment anyway. So there's no real win. The other thing, we could just not apply for grants, which that's not an option. They're too beneficial to the town.
So, but basically, when the departments though are spending, they're aware they have the grants and they're not in the budget, but chief will know, okay, I got $1 million for this, and so I can spend against it. And the budget amendment essentially codifies that at the end of the year to put it all back in one package again.
Correct. And the police department is the primary beneficiary of the grants. Town manager's gotten quite a few for street projects to help offset our street infrastructure account. But the expenses are not, maybe $5,000 for one item or something like that. They're very small grants. But you add a bunch of them up and it throws the numbers off.
For the police, it's about $225,000 a year, which is a pretty good chunk in grants, but we can't budget for that because we don't know if we're gonna get it.
But they do not buy those items if they don't get the grant.
Until they get the grant.
Correct.
Right.
Wasn't that an item for the auditor recommended that the whole process, you ensure that you do that?
They recommend we budget for the grants, but we can't.
No, I thought he said budget amendment.
Yeah, the budget amendment,
Right,
yes.
that's what he said.
Yes.
That was a finding in the audit
Yeah.
that we've corrected.
Yes, that was a finding a couple years ago, and that's why we now do this.
So you can tell anybody who questions why, this is why.
Right. That's great. And so like the parking the parking came in when we budgeted, right?
Correct.
All right. So I guess that was just really just our FYI. It's great that things are in good shape and
We were halfway through the year,
yeah.
so we'll see how the other half goes, but
Right.
we're halfway through the year, right now we're looking.
But we're through the part where a lot of the money comes in.
We are, but as Sheena's pointed out to me that transfer tax has slowed down, even for the month of October. So, we budgeted $700,000, correct? And I think we're a little over 444, I think, right now. 442,000 right now. So we're looking to make up the rest of it between now and the end of March. So it all depends on how many houses. So for us to do a budget here in Dewey Beach, I've said this before, it's very hard. We don't have, the beach replenishment tax has to go to the beach replenishment. But there's nothing for me or for Sheena or I to say, we know we're gonna get this much, there's 1,200 pieces of property in town, or 1,400. We know we're getting so much from each property for our yearly budget. We don't know that. We rely on transfer tax, which we have no control over. We rely on parking, which we have no control over. Rental tax, we have no control. Hotel tax, we have no control. Building permits, we have no control over any of those, really, to know how much is gonna be coming in. So it is tough to do a budget. Sheena's been doing a very good job since the 5 years I've been here, trying to project conservatively what she thinks we're gonna bring in revenues.
In the month of August, in the 8.5 years I've been here, was the first month that there was no property transferred for cash.
Wow.
So and the month of October was very low also.
And now, all those where the old grottos is that all residential up top there? Will we get that eventually then, and then some of the new houses? If it closes, if they're built in time, yeah.
But there's not a lot of property moving back and forth right now. There's a lot going into trusts.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's good. Do we have any public comment or questions on the budget? On the town financial status, I mean? Sorry, not the budget. All right, now just the last item on the agenda today is just to talk about our finance, our revenue workshop that's planned for December 8th at 3:30, and that's gonna be a working session with us and the commissioners. Sheena and her team, Sheena has directed her team to help us, or to the town group to gather a bunch of data from us, and we will not have our next year's budget yet, but rather this workshop is to look at the revenue streams that we have coming in, and from a more strategic standpoint, not just balancing the books, but kind of what knobs we do have to turn, given what, as Bill says, it's hard to budget for. And what knobs can we turn with what's in our current purview to increase revenue if we need it. We do have in another, is it 1 year or 2 years, that the police contract's gonna be up?
April's 27.
April's
We'll have to have a
27.
new police contract, and that will mean we'll have to find some revenue.
Yeah, and that's gonna be hefty, because we're already paying our officers starting salaries are about 10 grand less than the neighboring jurisdictions, and then, you gotta add the benefits and other things on top of that, so, okay, 13 police officers, you don't have to do a lot of math to know it's a pretty big number, and so, how are we gonna get there? And what ways can we get there, I will push back out, I'll take what, Sheena's giving me a bunch of just data dumps, I'll try to put it together in a more digestible format, because I've given her enough work to do, and her team, she's got enough going on. But we can discuss all that if between now and that meeting, if you all can think about ideas you might have for additional revenue, that obviously would be helpful as well. We are, in a sensitive environment also when we talk about revenue, because there's people that want to interpret our revenue needs for the town to be associated with the new public safety building, which that is already actually, that's budgeted for and taken care of. They've gotten grants. We have a very small amount that of the overall total that the town is going to pay for. It's manageable, and it's within budget, and there's no extra money needed for that. It's really to keep up with the pace of inflation of employee salaries and just the cost of living overall, supplies and everything else. Everything's going up. So
We had a suggestion a while back. I can't remember who on the committee came up with it, but I thought it was a pretty good idea about, again, we talked about, it's very limited in terms of what we can do to raise. You have to go and, get the citizens to approve some sort of levy or fee or tax. But there was one for public safety that I thought somebody had an idea that seemed to me to be a pretty easy sell to the town for an additional source of revenue.
yeah, and the problem is any of that stuff has to be by referendum, and so
I understand.
And so I think the question is, and what I want to try to understand with some of this strategic look and understanding, especially the police contract and when that comes in, and when do we need to do that revenue? Do we need to work on a referendum? Does it need to be this year? Does it need to be a year from now? And what are we looking at, and try to get our arms around that, because I don't think it's just let's just make up a number and great. We need to be thoughtful about it, and if we're going to ask citizens to vote for that, then we need to have the business case for doing that pretty well established, and sort of the future look at that. Does that make sense?
No, I understand what you're saying. My comment, I think we came up, again, I can't remember the person on the committee who came up with it. I don't credit where credit's due, but we talked about that the last time that we had one of these all-in financial planning sessions, and we've been asked over and over again to come up with ideas on new sources of revenue, and we don't seem to have pulled it together to pursue even that one.
When we say new sources of revenue, again, what's the ultimate goal? I'm just gonna, from a 20,000 foot view, we've got a very small area. There's a great opportunities for, people love to be here, but business wise, there's a lot of restrictions on what can or can't be done on Route 1 there. Ultimately the businesses should be helping to fund a lot of the community as a business owner myself. I do that where I'm at. But, I know that we've got some restrictive laws out there with in terms of the number of parking spaces per lot that need to be there on Route 1. Has anyone ever looked at sort of like a long-term plan for what they thought could be done with the town if
That's the purpose of the next meeting.
That's exactly what we want to do. Because, and I think we can look, and so what I've tried to gather is sort of historically, what is the total amount, what are the business taxes been? What are the total dollars, because we've gone since I got my house in 2009, or we're now a 12-month town. We're not closed. So now we need full season police, for example. And there's people living here. It's not just the businesses that are open. I mean, the businesses are open because they have business. So, do we need to reset that or just look at that again? Our rental tax to the town is 3%, and that's in the charter. I believe it's if I use the wrong word, but Bethany and Rehoboth are at 6% to the town on top of the county. Well, that's another referendum issue that we'd have to go to referendum for that. So I think if we're going to do a referendum asking anybody in the town for more money, then how do we craft that, and let's do a package that makes sense, right? And then again, of the existing fees that we have, let's have a look. The other thing that I talked to Bill about, we have a lot of people doing business on the beach. Again, it's not big giant things, but like that's the skimboard weekend takes up 2 blocks of the beach for the whole weekend, and they're not paying a lot. What are we getting out of that as a town versus what we're giving up by people not being able, the loss of use? And so again, I think if we can just go one by one down the various things and think about how the town has changed over the last number of years, and we can see that with some of the information. And we've got, what I've asked are numbers of hotel rooms, the numbers of businesses, the sizes, the businesses have expanded since COVID as well. So they're making more money. Is there a scaling there even more than what we've done, except saying add seats? So that's the stuff we can control. Maybe it's not going to move the needle a lot, but if we can, what can we do before we have to go to a referendum? Because what if we do a referendum and it doesn't pass the first time, we have to do it again? So it's really, what are all?
Well, personally, I'm happy to pay if there's a great plan to subsidize. But if it's just let's raise money for something that's a little more nebulous. It's I wouldn't want to put anything out personally.
No, but I mean the math. At some point, the math's not going to work. If we're already paying all of our staff less than the neighboring towns. We make up for that by paying their full health insurance benefits. But at some point, the math doesn't work. I mean, there's nobody here being a bad guy. There's money coming in, money going out. And so it's a hard reality. And how do we educate people about that? And how do we find a good way to close that gap that doesn't overly, that is fair to everybody? But we have people that will come into the meetings periodically and we get the view of, I only live here 3 months, and we never needed police before the bars were here, and I shouldn't have to pay anything. And okay, that's an opinion, but anybody but really, if you're in that situation, you pay $100 a year for your beach tax, and that's it.
So is it up for this committee to make the sort of the strategic long-term decisions of saying, like, we'd like to pay the employees more in exchange for letting them have a share of paying a share of their healthcare insurance like most of the rest of the country does? Or
what we do is provide feedback and recommendations to the commissioners that ultimately make this decision. But on December 8th, in that meeting, I believe most of the commissioners will be here, and we will be here, we'll all be in the same room together to brainstorm and kick around these ideas. And then that way, these are just ideas for Bill and Sheena, then they're going to go off after that and start building the budget for next year. And so then so some of these what ifs, they can run some scenarios, and again, we can say, okay, we know what next year is, but 2 years, 3 years, when this police contract comes up, how do we start getting to that gap where we may need to find $150,000 or $200,000 that is not easily done if our transfer taxes are going down, et cetera. I think we just need to, again, it's a strategic plan, best case, worst case scenarios, And what do we do? And then if we want to do a referendum, we can show that to people and say, look, if you have a better idea, that's fine, but this is the reality, this is the math. Numbers don't lie. I'm a numbers gal, so that's where we have to get. But I think that's, in my opinion, to socialize it, we have to be able to socialize it with people.
The other thing is, you probably also need to identify what we do, what we pay for that might be nice to have, not really needed.
Yes.
So we can say, look, we're coming to ask you for money, we've already identified cuts to go forward, so.
I think, I've been in public education for 30 years, and I've seen how things work when it comes to referendums in public education. From the northern Delaware, where I served as principal and administrator at high schools and middle schools in northern Delaware, and understanding, when you go to ask for money, to your point, is making sure that you're asking for what you need.
Yep.
And hey, and I'm not sure how it works here in government, but I understand in public education, when you go to referendum, you can split your referendums. So you can say, hey, this is what we're asking for on the operational aspect of things, and here are some things capital projects that we want to seek funding for. And at times people, in particular, like where we are here, they're struggling with the gentleman on the screen sharing, hey, this is what we're looking for, but that's really not what you need right now. And that people aren't right now in a good place with the wants. They'll be happy to make sure they take care of your need. But the wants, not so good.
And you gotta be careful, you just can't, if we're gonna go to the well, we need to be thoughtful about it,
You
and
better
go to
be
the well one
thoughtful,
time.
you better be intentional, and you better be able to, we in this room, out there, I live here too, if I go to somebody and somebody says, hey, I better be able to articulate it. And in essence, help them understand the why behind what it is that you're doing. So they're more apt to tell their friend, this friend, that friend, this friend, and they'll go vote. And you should survive even some of the more challenging perspectives that people will walk in that are already gonna say no.
That's right, I mean, you're gonna have that, we'll always do that.
I mean, I have to commend you on having this done, because it's my feeling, and I've been in business my whole life, and I've done God knows how many budgets, that what you're doing is essentially, you're opening up the budget process here to a lot of key players in this community. And instead of what happens a lot of times is one or two people are saying, well, this is what the numbers are, this is what they were last year, inflation's 3%, we know we've got one or two capital expenditures coming up, but if you have a brainstorming amongst all the people, you're already really selling the community. I think it's a great idea.
And it is
I only hope I can make it.
it is a public brainstorming. It is open to anybody in town that wishes to attend as well.
I think it's a great idea.
I would appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation. I'm looking forward to December 8th. And thinking about, how, to have your perspective, you only have so many revenue sources. That's it. And so we have to start thinking about long-term, and to your point, Dewey is becoming more of a 12-month place. It's growing, in essence, it's businesses and people coming to town. And I think we have to have a mindset that, hey, we're in a good place and we're growing, and we need to be considerate of our future and say, hey, this is where our need is. Make sure we emphasize it, that's what we're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean.
And again, we need qualified police, right?
Yes.
We need the lifeguards who's saving your life, so I don't want the bargain basement lifeguard,
Right.
right? I want the guy that can like use the defibrillator or whatever. And I mean,
And I
it's,
want to protect the most valuable resource, the beach, the
Yeah.
vet. That's why people come, that's why they visit. Yes, there are businesses here that also, but that's it. That's why people come, that's why I love it.
Like
That's why
somebody
we-
was saying, I think you mentioned that Rehoboth and Bethany are at these fees for certain things, and we're half of that.
Correct.
That shouldn't be, in my mind. And so that's a very convincing argument that you say, all we're doing is what we're doing, what the competition is doing out there. And you establish a time frame to do that. You don't do it in 1 year,
Yeah,
you do it over a 3-year plan. So 3 years from now, it doesn't hurt as much, and you're
Yeah.
with the other beaches here.
And with the cost, you show the benefit.
Yeah.
Because that's the basis of need satisfaction selling. It's gonna cost you, but this is all the benefits you're gonna get.
And I always hear, I've heard that some of the things that Bethany and Rehoboth charge for, we make it up in other ways, so that's gotta become clear too. How do we make up the deficit there from the 3% to 6%? Is it, we're making it up in other ways? It's a complicated analysis, I can guarantee you
Yeah,
that.
it is. But again, if we're gonna do a referendum, then we have one, we have one shot at it basically, and we gotta get it right so that it will pass. The split referendum's an interesting idea because that lets us, put a rental tax and maybe some other things in there.
I'm not sure how that works.
Well, but I mean, we
here.
could, that's something for downstream, but we really, again, we have to, you can only go to the well really one time, and it's gonna be something that's gonna say, okay, this
It's
is,
your need.
you know,
I can't emphasize that enough, it's your need.
yes.
You see what happens when people decide to add a lot of extra, and then that's what people get, I'm good, and you lose both.
And it's super easy to say, I mean, a third of our budget is our police, right? And
And the town and the police and the people that serve this town deserve that.
that's right.
They earn that, and I respect that. And as a, and people, as long as you're educating them, will be within reason, say, yes, we need to make sure we're in line with other folks.
Well, we also have to be careful about comparing ourselves to Bethany and Rehoboth. I mean, Dewey Beach is we're not in the same league. And then that gets into, a whole nother conversation too. But I think it's a dangerous game to try and compare ourselves to those towns. I mean, we can't.
Yeah, but from a salary basis though, if we're $10,000 less for a starting salary, then, there's some things where it's hard to recruit staff. That's the biggest thing we have
We're
to.
18,000 right now
18,000.
for our starting police officer in Rehoboth, compared to Dewey Beach.
Okay,
We're
The
18,000.
difference,
Difference, yes.
it's huge.
that's a lot.
Yeah, if we don't compare ourselves, then we won't be able to hire anybody.
I can tell you from an educator perspective, you can look at the salaries across the district when it comes to a teacher. They're definitely looking at that. Because there's some significant differences between, say, Cape Henlopen School District teacher versus a school teacher in Woodbridge. Or you go to Brandywine School District up in North Wilmington, and you compare that salary to Woodbridge, Seaford, or even Cape. There is some validity to being careful about how much you compare because of cost of living and those kinds of things. But understand this, at least from an educator perspective, I'm looking at the starting salary, and that's the place I'm going to go to first.
Well, I think the salary comparison is what to do, but other things like, maybe we're not gonna offer the same, community stuff for, I don't know, I mean, there's different.
The thing is, you don't focus on salary. Salary is something you need to do to get quality.
That's right.
What are the services they're providing?
Right.
And then you're paying for the service, not for the person.
That's
The
right.
person just has,
That's right.
Playing that.
do
That's
it,
right.
and it's how you sell it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think and really that's gonna be the main, that's the main part of it, because I think a lot of people, if you delve into the budget, that sooner or later that's gonna have to happen. Right, and so it's when and how do we make sure it gets through in a way that's palatable and we can do it, so we don't waste a lot of time churning through it.
Time, energy, trying to get the yes vote.
And we're not up for election here, so we don't really care about that.
Yeah. So, I just got elected, so do it until it's not my next turn, yes. No, but we want to keep Dewey in all the ways that Dewey is Dewey, and we want to keep our good people here and support them financially and with their health insurance and their take-home cars and whatever we can do to make it a place that people want to come and stay and keep us safe and moving forward.
That's the whole key, because I have friends who used to be, a lot of people came here in the 60s, totally different place. And now people come, they love it. They love coming here on the weekend. They bring their kids, they do all kinds of stuff. And, that's what they like the fact that you got the beach, you got the bay, the little playground where the Lion Club did, all these little things that are around here. That's really what you're funding, all that stuff.
That and, you know, ensuring the safety and security of the people so that they can enjoy, and that's where, you know, your police, you know.
And we are a year-round community, despite what I keep getting told.
I've been year round for 25 years. I just live here 25 all the time. I love the beach during the winter season.
Do we have any more public comment about the workshop? Obviously, welcome to attend. And any other discussion? I think we're probably ready to adjourn otherwise.
I have one suggestion or ask for the workshop. I mean, this is my first year on the committee, so I'm learning a ton, but I don't know enough where I feel comfortable. Well, I want to prepare for the workshop. So is there a way for us to take the existing revenue streams we have, identify what levers, buttons we have available to us, like parking, changing the rate, you know, hourly? What do we have? What levers do we have per revenue stream? And then what does it take to get it approved? Whether it's bringing it to the board versus referendum. That way I'd be able to come to the table more prepared with ideas on what we could do to help with the revenue.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, so I mentioned that Sheena and the town team collected a bunch of data for me. And I'm gonna try to take that and it's kind of the raw data that we'll get at exactly what you're saying. And I'm gonna try to put together some things before the meeting and get them out to everybody and we'll post them. But
And I'm going to provide my liaison announcement reminder. It's wonderful that your chair is sharing this. Do not discuss it amongst yourselves unless you're in the meeting,
That's right.
okay?
That's why I'm trying to be really careful.
Do not
about.
email each other back and forth and have discussions about this.
Yeah. And if you have questions about stuff, you know, we can talk about it, but again, I want to try to post things and try to stick to the meetings to make sure we're fully transparent with the public.
Right. What you do, just so you can make a suggestion that, hey, Madam Chair, would you share this with the people? Do you think it's worthwhile sharing? That you can do.
Yeah.
But
Just
don't go back and forth in discussion because it's a
You have to
violation
go-
of freedom of information.
In the military, that's a form of communication. You always go to the one spot and that breaks it up.
Right. And again, and as we get materials, you know, Kate will post all of it with the meeting notice too. So then also we'll make sure that
The public
everybody
will
has
have
access to what
it
we're
that
doing.
way. Yeah.
Can we get a copy of the report that Brown?
Yes, let me ask Sean. He did not send that in advance, so we'll,
No, we just have the statements from Brown. He
I
did
know.
not send his
I don't
report.
like
but we can ask him and we can post that.
It should be posted.
Yes.
We used to get that.
Yeah, yes, this was a bit last minute dragging him in here, so I will do better next time. I was worried about the budget stuff and then I lost lock on that, so.
You got in here. That was good.
Yeah, no, he did a great job and, okay. Great, all right. And with that, any other comments, discussion items? No? All right, happy? Yes, I do need a
All
motion.
right, I'll make the motion you're asking for.
I second it.
He seconded.
I second it.
All right, adjourn.
No, wait, you gotta have to vote. Gotta vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
Time?
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
6:50.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.